Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. So we have a new project starting here, as if I didn't have enough going on. I gotta get this Bearcat painted. But sidetracked as always. This is an airplane I've been thinking about for a long time, and I decided to just get started on it. So this is going to be a little video series on scratch building. And honestly, I didn't film any of it up to this point, but I'm going to go over some of the procedures I use for designing some of these types of these simple type models. So if you're thinking this is an F-18, you'd be wrong. This is a YF-17. This is what came before the F-18. This was built by Northrop before it was Northrop Grumman. McDonnell Douglas did not build this airplane. It was a Northrop design. So McDonnell Douglas bought the rights, stole the idea, however you want to say it, to make the FA-18 after this airplane. So what was the YF-17? And honestly, building is, for me, a lot of it has to do with the history of the airplane. I think it's super neat. Like for the X-1, I mean, obviously a lot of history there. But this is an airplane that is very rarely modeled, and I thought it'd be neat to do one. And it's also the reason why I picked up a fresh E-flite F-16, because I'm going to be repainting that. And the reason why I'm going to repaint the F-16 is because this airplane, the YF-17, and the YF-16 were in a competition in the mid-70s for the U.S. lightweight fighter program. And so basically what I've done here is created the plans already. These are all just pencil drawn. I don't have any CAD programs or anything. And so I want to go over some of the ways that I do this, because there are multiple ways, it's just the way that I do it. So because I'm cheap, I could have taken this file that I got off the internet and taken it to a print shop somewhere and had them make this the exact size that I wanted. And that's definitely an option. I don't always prefer that, because you end up with a lot of lines that aren't necessary for the model, and so it can get confusing when you're trying to make templates and stuff. And also, when you blow this up to the right size, these lines get pretty big, and so things get fuzzy, and it's hard to know where to make your templates and stuff. So typically I'll draw it out by hand, and the way I do that is, you see I've got multiple stations here, a whole bunch of numbers. So I draw a center line on the plane. You see a center line down the side of the fuselage here, down through the exhaust of the nose cone. And I take multiple stations. This is a pretty simple airplane, so you don't have to do a whole lot, but I took multiple station cuts, and on those I measure them out, and I decide first I decide how big I want the airplane, and then I go from there. Then I start with the design. So in this case, I wanted to do twin 70 millimeters, so it has to be, in the case of an EDF, big enough for the fans to fit, for the landing gear to fit around the fans, for there to be enough inlet and exhaust area, battery placement, stuff like that. There's a lot of different things to consider when you're choosing a size of a model. In this case, I went with about the same scale as the F-16, because I wanted to have both the YF-16 and the YF-17 together at the same scale. So I thought that'd be neat. And it just worked out that the 70s fit really well, and there was enough inlet area and stuff. So I start out, I get a multiplication factor based on this drawing. In this case, it happened to just be 9, which made it super easy. I take a calculator, I measure the points out, I multiply everything by 9, and then I draw it out on the paper. So you can see here I have my center line, and then my station points, just like the drawing, just like the 3-view, and I move them onto the paper essentially. So now I've done the top view here, only done the whole fuselage, and then one side, just one wing and tail, because there's no reason to do both sides. So you can see here I've done my landing gear placement. That's my landing gear block. That's my rear block. The top view is pretty simple, because in this case we're building in a box shape, and the top view, or the top and bottom pieces, are full size. You can see here, that's the thickness of the skin, so I have to take that out of the side pieces. That's why the top one doesn't have anything like that. So And these are the strakes. I've decided to do 2 layers of 6mm depron for the strakes and the wings. The wings are solid depron, not built up, not foam cores. I wanted to keep them super thin. You can see here I've got my fuselage stations, my formers. You see here in the corners we have the spots for all the foam build up to round the corners off. So when we build it all as a box, then we round it off. And I've put some tabs in here that interlocked into the fuselage sides, which made fitting the parts together really, really good. And it went together pretty nice, honestly. Back here, you can see I've got a couple of plywood formers. One for the tail, the vertical tails to hold the angle and to support them, and then one for the elevators. So those are 1/4" plywood parts. The wing here you can see, and the tails, all very similar. Since this is a solid core, I've drawn a 1/2 inch back here for balsa wood, and on the tails I did a 1/4 inch in the front, 1/2 inch in the back. The leading edge slats, or I'm sorry, the leading edge flaps will be solid balsa wood to keep them stiff, even though that makes them kind of heavy. And yeah, so it's pretty basic drawing. And no, I'm not going to be offering these or printing them and selling them or giving them to people that want to build one. They're just not comprehensive enough for someone to take these and just start building an airplane. And I encourage you to do your own design work and scratch build your own airplanes. It's a lot of fun. I'm doing this as kind of like a way I do it. Maybe you guys can take some ideas from it. But anyways, so that's the overall design of the YF-17. As you can see, there's a lot of stuff missing, and the reason for that is because there's like the fan placement right there. The reason for that is that I tend to, there's obviously main parts that need to be figured out before we start, gear plates and stuff like that. But there's a lot of stuff, especially on a one-off model, that it just makes sense when you're building it to go ahead and just build those parts in the moment. So you would waste a lot of time designing these intricate little pieces when you could just make them by hand to fit and save yourself some time. And about 30 hours later, you end up at this stage. So I'll get the wing off here in a second to show you guys the insides. Still a lot of work left to do, but the basic airframe is there. You can see it obviously sitting on top of the E-flite F-16. And obviously, like, the tails aren't on, they're not glued on, the stabs aren't done yet, nothing's hinged, so that's why they're all taped up. And you can see, like, it needs some body work still, but it's roughed out and it's the basic shape right now. So let's get this thing on the stand and give you guys a closer look. So you can see all these parts right here are all made on the plane. These were not drawn out. I just did some measuring while I was there and did it from there. So I haven't also done the spars in the wing yet. I need to make some material. I'm going to make some flat carbon spars, one for the back, one for the front. They'll be attached with probably bolts, a couple up here and then a couple back here. Now I've tied in the rear mount because basically all the weight will be hanging off of these 2 points. Some of it won't be because the fuselage does make some lift, but most of it's going to be from the wing. And so what I've done here is I've tied the main gear blocks into the wing hold downs, or the wing mounts. This is some basswood. You can use like thin plywood as well. 1/4 inch plates, so we got a balsa stringer down in here that the gear is also tied into. Basically it's like a shear web that the plate is glued to keep it from ripping out. I don't plan on landing this airplane hard, so I'm not too worried about it. Should be plenty strong enough. I've also got more wood in here to help attach this, and it's actually carried through all the way through the battery compartment, because now that the wing is gone, or that the fuselage was cut out and then this is all cut out, this now becomes a pretty weak spot on the model, especially because the weight of the battery is going to be sitting right here. So on high G maneuvers, it's going to want to break off right here essentially. So what I've done is I've run some wood all the way across and then tied the mount in there, and the battery tray isn't in yet. I haven't made it yet. I don't know exactly where the battery's going to go yet. Probably somewhere right in here. It's a 7,000, so it's a pretty heavy pack. Shouldn't have to be very far forward. So then I've also helped strengthen. I use a balsa wood back here to help kind of tie this into the rest of the structure. So you have to think about, you know, the strength of the airplane, what you plan on doing with it. Is it a cruiser? Is it something you're going to pull some G's with? How fast is it going to be? A lot of things go into designing how strong to make a model, but basically what the whole principle behind the box jet is, and if some of you remember that have been around for a while, remember my 9-foot long F-18 that I scratch built out of depron. That was just a ton of fun to fly. It weighed 15 pounds, super lightweight, and you can just do all kinds of fun stuff with it. This is going to be very similar to that performance-wise, just in a smaller package. So, and potentially even better performance, honestly. One of the things I really wanted to do, or have wanted to do for a long time, is to experiment with leading edge flaps, and this is the perfect airplane for that. This is what I would consider a high alpha platform, like the F-16. Now F-18s typically as models don't high alpha nearly as well as F-16s, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that the wings don't have leading edge flaps on them on the models. And so I really wanted to play with them, and I think I got a pretty good method to make these work. They're super strong, and that's one of the things you have to do when you do a leading edge flap, is it can't twist, it can't flutter, because you're just going to lose the whole wing. So these have to be very stiff. They can't have any flex to them, and they're a half-inch thick balsa carved essentially. So let's see if I can show you the wing profile here. I actually hand carved the airfoil into the wing, and actually I added on a third piece. It's just a piece of 3mm depron on the center section up here to give it some more shape. But this is a nice scale thickness, and you can see here that I've essentially carved in some washout. It's hard to see with my finger in the way, but I've got some washout, and also the leading edge is drooped at the tip. So to try and combat any tip stalls or anything, you can kind of see it now. You can see how the leading edge droops, and that's to keep it, or to help keep it from tip stalling, which with leading edge flaps down, and they go down pretty aggressive on the YF-17. They take a lot of angle. I don't see this thing having tip stall issues at all, especially at the weight this thing's going to be at. Power system wise, it's going to have two X-Fly 70mm that came out of Bentley's G650, which I believe are the same fans they use in the B1, and that's a pretty heavy model. That's a 12-13 pound model probably. This I'm hoping to be around 8 to 8.5 pounds, so the performance should be really, really good, on par with the F-16, if not slightly better, at least in vertical. Speed probably be pretty similar, maybe even F-16 might be faster. But a couple of the issues that I have with this model, and design-wise, is mostly around the propulsion. Now, most F-18 models you see, especially foam ones, are all single fan with a split tailpipe. There's a good reason for that. It's simpler, it's cheaper, it's easier to do, it's lighter. There's a lot of pluses to it, but we had these two fans, and I thought it'd be neat to do a twin. So the problem is, there's plenty of inlet area, but we have the landing gear in the way, and I didn't want to use rotating mains because the real one didn't really have them. And not that I did it for that purpose, but when you do a rotating main, if you don't have doors on it, you end up with these giant holes in the bottom of the belly where the tires kind of stick out. And then also the 90-degree units that you can buy have a big block off the bottom of them, and that would be hanging out as well. I just didn't want to see that. So what I have is a trailing link strut. The real YF-17 had straight legs, unlike an F-18. So they're a sort of straight leg. They're not perfectly straight, but in this case they'll work fine, and they'll also put the tire up inside. Unfortunately, that tire is going to be in front of the fan. It'll be off to the side. It's just inside the wall, so it's not like it's right in front of the fan. And I placed the fans far enough behind the tire so that way the turbulence wouldn't be too bad. But basically, what I've done here is just to kind of show you guys the inlets. Now, the inlets aren't really scale either, so that's the one hard thing about building a box jet, is you have to make some scale sacrifices. Now, overall, the plan for them, the profile essentially perfectly scale. Most of the stations, most of the shape is pretty close to scale. Unfortunately, the inlets on the real one are canted in just like an F-18. And while the frontal shape is fairly close to scale, as is the side, they're supposed to be canted into the side and kind of kidney bean shaped. So they're not perfect, but that's one of those things where I was willing to just give that up and for sake of simplicity. But you see here, it's nice and straight through. The wing will form the roof of the duct, and I've got some foam behind the mount there to kind of continue the duct onto the fan. So it's by no means optimal. It's not as good as a fiberglass duct, but I would believe that it's going to be better than like what the F-16 has, which is a bunch of cheater holes and a sort of a duct. So while there might be some turbulence caused by the landing gear units, which I've tried to keep as far out as possible, both for airflow and for stability on the ground, the tires are going to be off to the side, and it shouldn't be a huge deal. And since I won't have doors on it, there'll be a slot right here for the tire and the strut. And so that'll also supply a little bit of extra air into the fan. Now, a couple of things I've done or will be doing to help with the inlet area, and these look far boxier on video than they really are in person. But anyways, you can see here how this wall, it's open into the duct. So this section up here is extra inlet air. Now, on the real one, this wall comes in closer to about right here, and it connects with the boundary layer plate, which the F-18 also has one of those, and just I don't have it on yet. But essentially, that connects to that plate and makes a smooth airflow out around the inlet. On this one, if I would have put that plate there, I would have lost a lot of inlet area. So what I'm going to do is, much like I did on my Freewing F-18, I'm going to have a plate, but much like this, it's going to be floating off of the surface, just like the real one, but instead of it dissipating the inside air out, it's going to just go behind the plate and into the inlet. So you'll see that when I get farther along in the build. But this is just like one of the neat little tricks. I've done that before on some other airplanes, but basically I'm trying to get as much air as I possibly can to these fans because I want to perform well at low speed as well. So let's turn this thing around. I can show you guys the structure in the back of the airplane. This video is getting long. I'm going to cut it off here in a second. But these are temporary pivot points for the stabs. These are just drill bits. I plan on using probably some 1/4-inch aluminum rod with some brass bushings in the stabs. But basically you can see I've made these 1/4-inch plywood formers, and I have attached these pieces to the foam and to the formers. For one, it really makes this stab arrangement strong, and it also ties in the former for the vertical tails into the rear one to create a complete structure in here that's much stronger than if these two formers were just individual. And if I had just done a little short plate here, it wouldn't be nearly as strong. But now that it's tied into two formers, there's going to be way less twisting motion, and it's going to be much, much stronger. So little stuff like that we can do. You can see I've made some like little foam corner pieces as like ducting up in there to kind of help with the airflow instead of it just being a big square inside. You can also see how I've kind of shaped away some of the stepped foam in the corners. I have to make some afterburners. I was going to just make them all part of the foam, but it makes them kind of blocky looking, and I want them to look pretty nice, so I'll probably just make some fiberglass ones, just some quickie ones. The tails are actually 6mm and a layer 3, so they're 9mm total with the airfoil shaped into them. I might balance these because they're pretty big. The verticals are actually just a piece of 6, and I'll have some spar coming up into them. But yeah, that's the YF-17 project for now. I have a number of things I have to finish before moving on to like the polyurethane step and putting servos in and all that. But it's pretty far along, as you can see. This is, like I said, it's about 30 to 40 hours at this point between the drawings, cutting the parts, and then assembling. And then building, obviously. So anyways, hope you guys are excited for this project as I am. I'm really looking forward to it. Like I said, I've wanted a YF-17 for a long time, and I've really, really missed my big F-18. ever since I crashed it a couple years ago. So, and if you're not aware, we built these big T-38s to kind of take the place of the big F-18s that we are using for FPV flying. So this is very, very similar build style to that T-38. It's just a smaller package. This is 66 inches long with a 43-inch wingspan, or 44 inches with the missile rails. So anyways, a long video to start off, but kind of wanted to go over the whole project. And yeah, the next video will be after some more progress. But we need to get this Bearcat painted, and then after that we can get this puppy finished up. And of course we got to repaint the F-16. So anywho, hope you guys enjoyed it, and we'll see you in the next one.